Hello everyone, welcome to today's tutorial. Today we'll be looking at how to make this beautiful gown you're watching now. Now, if this looks like something you're interested in and want to learn, then stay tuned, watch till the end, and we can now go right into the tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so we'll be starting with our basic gown block. Now this is for a full block. It was drafted on fold and traced into two. This is also the back pattern, which was also traced on fold, and then it has been traced on into a full pattern. I will set aside the back now, and then we'll start working with the front. Okay, the design we're working with has an asymmetric neckline, which is the main reason why this block was drafted on fold and then traced into a full pattern. Okay, so the alteration we need to do now, first of all, is to create a shoulder dart, which is what I'm doing now. What I did here was that I determined the midpoint on my shoulder, and I've drawn a straight line there to the bust apex. I'll repeat the same thing for the second shoulder. Now that I'm done with this, the next thing will be for me to open up my bust dart so that I can open up rather the shoulder dart. Okay, I decided to cut out some of the excess on the sides there, and then I just decided to separate the bodice from the skirt of the pattern. Okay, now that I have the bodice alone, we can easily work with this, and I went ahead to open up the bust dart, and at the same time I'm opening up the shoulder dart already. At this point, I'm just going to close up the bust dart like so. I'll use my pins to secure it, just to keep it in place for the meantime. Now I'll measure what I have in between my paper. That's the space I have in between, and it happens to be 4. Now I'm going to divide 4 by 4, which is going to be giving me 1 inch. Now I'll measure out that 1 inch just like so and connect it to the bust apex. Please note that we're taking that out. Now I'll come outside my armhole here, measure my shoulder slope, which was 1.5, and then the 1 inch I took out from there, I'm going to replace it back. Now look at how I returned it. You're not going to take it back inside. You now have a new armhole just like this. I'll repeat the same process for the second shoulder. Now I'm opening up the bust dart. I'll repeat the same thing by opening up the shoulder dart also. You cut to the bust apex, but make sure you don't cut through so that your paper doesn't cut off. I'll take out the 1 inch which I did for the other shoulder, and in the same way I'm going to be returning it. Okay, now that we are done with our shoulder tightening, at this point we're going to be tightening on the bust, and also make sure that your side aligns like so. If yours doesn't align neatly like this, all you need to do is just to blend it. Okay, so now we're going to be tightening on the bust, and I'm just going to be making use of 0.5 inch on both sides of the dart there. That is my on the bust line, so I'm marking 0.5 inch on both sides of the line. I'll come with my curve and create that curve there, can you see? And then I'll return it back to my dart leg. Okay, I'll repeat the same process for the other side. Okay, now we're done tightening on the bust. Okay, we need to avoid having a sharp point on the bust apex there. So all you need to do is take your ruler and try to blend that place so you don't have it sharp there. You don't want, after sewing, your nipple point is going to be pokey and pointy. It doesn't make sense like that, and it won't look nice. So you just need to blend it up like that. Now for us to close our shoulder dart, what you need to do now is to open up back your bust dart, can you see? And then go ahead and close up your shoulder dart. At that point my pattern separated from each other, so I had to use gum to fix it back. That's why you need to be careful so that you don't cut off yours. Okay. Next thing will be for me to repeat the same process for the other one. When you have your pattern drafted in full like this, whatever step you do for one side, you just have to repeat the same process for the other one. Now that I've closed the shoulder, I'm just going to blend back my shoulder like so, can you see? Alright, now because this dress is an asymmetric neckline, you want to determine how it's going to look like. So you determine where you're going to be having one shoulder and where it's going to fall. At this point I've picked mine to be the right. I'm going to have it to my shoulder on the right, and then to the left it's going to drop. Okay, I took 1 inch away from the shoulder, and at this point I've started deciding how I want the shape to be like. Okay, at first I connected it to the initial armhole, and then I remembered that, oh no, we have altered that and changed where the armhole is, so I had to take it back to the outside. Okay, now I think I'm okay with what I have, so I'm trying to blend it and make it more obvious. Okay, now that we are done with this, on that shoulder where we have that shoulder joining, you know, we're supposed to have a shoulder mark there. I'm going to be tightening that place by 0.5 on each side of the line. Okay, this is to avoid our neckline from gaping. Okay, all right, so now we're done, and then at this point we'll need to be closing back our bust dart, and to do that we'll open up the waist dart. You remember the principle that this works with. To close a dart you need to open up another dart. Okay, I'll repeat the same process for the second side too. Okay, at this point we're done with the front block, so I will go ahead now and trace out cut out all my pattern piece. At this point I decided to label the pattern, and what I wrote there, RSU, means right side up. This is because this pattern is no longer a half block, it's full. So I'm going to be, if I want it to appear like this directly on fabric, I'll have to cut it with the right side facing up. Now for this side I decided to explain something. You can decide to trace out, just to cut out just the dart and leave the shoulder joined like this, and then at the same time you can decide to cut through to the shoulder. Whichever you decide to do works, but at this point I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I decided to cut out my excess from the side first while I think on what will be most appropriate for this style. Okay, you can just leave the shoulder joined like this and then cut out all the excess you have on the dart area and join it back to the bust apex. That works too. So at this point I realized that, okay, since this other side will be running to the over bust, it won't be nice if this one, the sewing, stops at the bust apex. So I decided to cut through just like I'm doing now. Okay, and have it more like a shoulder princess dart. Can you see that? Okay, so we have our front block ready, our front bodice block ready. Okay, now just like I said, RSU, it means you'll be placing the pattern just like this. That means the right side of your fabric will be facing you. Okay, so for the skirt, the first thing we're going to be doing is to mark that place. You need a straight line that extends to the end of the skirt there. So what I'm going to do is to determine the point so that I can just get a straight line. That's basically what I did there. Now that I have this straight line, I want to close my waist dart. The reason I'm closing this dart is so that I can shapen the waistline again. At this point you can see that the 1 inch I came down on the waistline, that line is no longer straight, so I just decided to blend it up. Okay, which is the main reason why I had to close the dart. Now for this side of the dart, it's going to remain permanently closed. We don't need a dart there, so I'll leave that permanently closed. And then I've opened up the other side because we're going to be cutting through this other that. Okay, I'll cut through that line now all the way. Okay, we'll cut out the dot allowance, and then the waistline also. Okay, now what we need to do at this point is to create our slash lines. You can just decide on how you want the slash lines to be. Okay, I didn't use any specific measurements, I just ruled. You go ahead and cut through now, but make sure you don't cut through so your pattern doesn't separate into different pieces. Okay, just cut to the extreme end, but don't cut it all the way through. Okay, alright, can you see what we have? I'll come with a fresh new paper because I need to spread this open. Okay, now I'm going to decide how much allowance I'm going to be adding to my slashed lines. I have decided to add 1 inch to spread by 1 inch, so in between each cutout I'm going to be opening it up by 1 inch. So this is basically all I'll be doing all through to the end. Just open it up by 1 inch, and this is totally by choice. You can decide how much fullness you want to add to that side of your skirt. Okay, now I'm done, and then I'll fold it back. I want to fold it back before I mark. I joined with my marker a straight line to join all the spaces there. I just want to trace out that line again, that's all. Okay, can you see? And then I'll go ahead and cut it out. I'm just cutting out all the excess paper I have there, and this is what we have. I'll go ahead and trim out every other excess that we have. Okay, so this is it. Our skirt pattern is ready also. So this is what we have for the front. Can you see? I'll set them aside now so that we can work on the back. Okay, this is our back block, and what we need to do basically is on the shoulder Please note that this was drafted on fold, traced into two to have this full block. So definitely we're going to be having a straight line in between there. Yes. Alright, this is the back. We're supposed to have a line there. Okay, to work on the asymmetric neckline, you have to decide, and to do that we have to bring the front shoulder, okay, to make it explanatory for you. So can you see, because we're going to be cutting on the right side, this is how we'll be placing our pattern. So we also need to determine where we're going to be having our shoulder, because if you don't do this, you might just take your shoulder to the opposite direction and the other shoulder, and it won't make sense. So what I did here was that I measured what I have for the shoulder of the front, and then I used that to determine my shoulder for the back. Okay, so if you remember, for the front I went out by 1 inch. I did the same for the back, measured what I have left, and I could see that it tallies with the front. Okay, now at this point I decided to mark my neckline, and I set my tape like that because I want to determine how much I want the back shoulder to drop by. Okay, how low rather I want my asymmetric neckline to be, and I decided to come down by 4 inches there. Okay, so now I'm done with the neckline. Then you can see that I'm creating a straight line from the bust there back to the shoulder. Okay, now if you want your shoulder to extend, if you want to separate your pattern on the shoulder just like we did for the front, you have to determine for the shoulder lines to meet, so that you don't have the lines going different direction. I decided to measure what I have for the center pattern for the front, and then I use the same thing to determine where my line will be on the shoulder of the back. Okay, now for this side I'm going to be tightening it by 0.25 on both sides of the line, which is what I've done there now. Okay, now we'll go ahead to cut out. Okay, I just took a look around my pattern to see if there was anything that needed correction, and I noticed I didn't draw that straight line for that dot. Some persons might just be wondering why that dot looks different from the other, so I just decided to put that straight line there. Okay, so nobody gets confused. I'm cutting through the waistline now. And then I'll go ahead and separate the back bodice. Now I'm closing this dot because I want to reshape or restraighten that line for my back tightening. These things might look insignificant, but they are not. Okay, so just take your time and undo them. Okay, here I decided to close that dot there and then try to blend that point. Okay, can you see? I'll go ahead and cut out now. Alright, this is our back pattern and you can see, it looks beautiful. Now I'll set it aside and we're going to just be cutting out the skirt. Okay, for the skirt we don't really need much alteration, just to close up the dot there and blend it up. Okay, that's all. And for this back skirt block, note that you don't really need both pattern, they are the same thing. Okay, so if you don't want to go through this stress, you can just draft your back bodice on fold and then have your back skirt as one piece. Because now that I have this on fold, I'm not going to be making use of the both of them. I will just, unless I want to cut the back skirt twice, but there's really no need. All I'm going to do is to place my back skirt on fold and cut out the two piece. So basically what I'm saying is that this pattern is the same, this back skirt, they are the same thing. Okay, and you need only one. All right, so you can see that they are the same thing. At this point I decided to label the CB so we don't get confused. Okay guys, so this are my pattern set all. Alright, for the back I decided to label the CB. Okay, can you see? This is my front and these are the skirt. So all my pattern pieces are ready. At this point we're going to be proceeding to transferring to fabric. Okay, thank you for watching up to this point. Okay, now this is the fabric we'll be working with. Can you see? It's a crepe fabric. Okay, here this fabric I have it to be 4 yards, but at the end I didn't use everything. I just exhausted like 2 yards and some inches, so depends on what you want. So I think basically 2.5 yards is enough for this tie. At this point I decided to determine where the stretch of the fabric will be and also where the right side is. So now you can see how I've placed my pattern and I have the right side of the fabric up. It is the right side of the fabric you are seeing now. Okay, I have the patterns placed on the right side of the fabric. Okay, please take note of that. Now I'll cut out and then okay, now this is the back. Okay, on the side I have 1/2 inch, that's 1.5 inch, and then 1/2 inch round every other place on the pattern. Only on the side seam I have 1.5. Okay, this is the front skirt pattern and on the side I have 1.5. On the hemline I added 3 inches. 2 inches is for hemming, but I decided to add 1 length again to the length of the gown. Now on this side where we're going to be joining together, I added 1 inch. Normally you want to add ½ inch, but because I don't want to line the skirt pattern, I decided to add 1 inch so that I can knit in the slit, because there's going to be a slit in front, remember. So I want to use that 1 inch to knit in the slit. Now I'll go ahead and cut out what I have. Okay. Okay, so this is the back. Remember what I told you about the back? You can see I placed my fabric on fold, and then I added 1 inch for zipper allowance and 1 inch on the side seam. Okay. Alright, so these are my pattern. Now we're going to be proceeding to sewing. I decided to cut lining for the upper bodice. I did for just the front and the back bodice. I didn't cut lining for the skirt, and the reason I did this is because of the asymmetric neckline, which needs to be knitted, and I don't want to use facing, so I decided to cut a full bodice again for the front and the back bodice. Okay, now I've taken out my pattern paper, and then I'm going to be joining like this, and then we'll repeat almost the same process for the other side, which is like this. Can you see? Alright, I'll do this for the fabric and the lining, and then we'll come to continue. Okay guys, so this is it. Can you see? This is what we have for the front. I'll repeat the same process for the back. Alright, I'm marking the one which is for the lining, okay, so I don't mix them up. Now take them out now, set them aside, and then we can start working on the main fabric. Okay, you can see that I'm setting them back the way they should be, which is like this. I'll take out my pattern paper, and then this is how we're going to be joining them. Can you see? Okay, so I'll do that now for the main fabric and the lining, and then we'll come back and continue. Now that I'm done with joining all the fabric pieces together, you can see what we have. The next thing we're going to be doing is to knitting the armhole, the neckline. Yes, the neckline, which we're going to be doing on ½ inch, and then we're repeating the same thing for the back also. We'll be knitting the neckline. Okay, I'm placing them fabric and lining. Can you see? All right. Okay guys, after joining the neckline, this is what we have. Now at this point where we have our asymmetric neckline, the dropped shoulder, I decided to leave an opening there because we need to cut the sleeve for that shoulder. And what I have here is 5 inches. Remember, 5 inches on fold, which is 10. Remember, for the front I came down by 5, for the back I went down by 4 inches, which is 9 inches, and then I decided to mark 5 inches, which is like extra. Bye.